The conventional effects of the critical war between Ukraine and Russia are now emerging from the ground conflict zone within the strategic borders of the Eastern European bloc. The effects of the war began to spread to many important locations and began to embrace the Black Sea and the Crimea. Leading actors in this strategic area, such as Bulgaria, Georgia, Ukraine, Turkey, and Romania, are of great importance in terms of influencing the course of the Black Sea and preventing Russia from spreading danger from Crimea. In particular, the presence of NATO members Bulgaria, Turkey, and Romania's navies in the Black Sea is critical for the alliance. The Black Sea policies of these countries towards the war between Ukraine and Russia depend entirely on the attitude of the Moscow administration, especially the measures taken by NATO members in the Black Sea against Putin's navy are very remarkable. Romania and Turkey are both strengthening the Ukrainian navy and adding submarines and aircraft carriers to their navies, undermining Russian dominance in the Black Sea. The technical support of the US, French, and Spanish navies to their Black Sea allies, and the critical moves of Turkey and Romania to strengthen their Black Sea navies are dealing a powerful blow to Putin's Black Sea dreams. If you remember, the Russian armed forces carried out large missile attacks, 71 of them on the territory of Ukraine. One of the caliber cruise missiles launched by the Russian Navy at Ukraine entered Romanian airspace. As a result of this situation, the commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian armed forces, General Valery Zaluzhny, reported that 2 people were killed. Following the striking situation, Romania signaled that it would directly increase its security measures in the Black Sea against the possible danger posed by Russia within the scope, namely for a much safer Black Sea. The Romanian Ministry of Defense requested approval from the country's parliament to purchase submarines for the Black Sea fleet. Currently, the Romanian Ministry of Defense has already begun work to initiate procedures for the coordination of various funding programs in the interests of the Navy of his country. However, this demand decision from the Romanian parliament was officially the clearest proof that the Romanian Ministry of Defense took a striking step for the Black Sea. The demands set out in the document include the purchase of minesweepers and submarines and the modernization of missile carriers currently in Romanian Navy service. The type and number of submarines planned to be purchased and the estimated purchase amount were not specified. Currently, Romania has no operational submarines. The last Romanian submarine Delfinul has not sailed since 1996, but Romania is looking forward to launching a brand new submarine in the cool waters of the Black Sea. With this critical work. In fact, last year, Romania signed a memorandum of intent with France to purchase 2 French Scorpene 2000 submarines. The estimated value of the purchase was approximately 500 million euros. The Scorpene is a next-generation type of diesel-electric attack submarine manufactured by the French naval group in collaboration with the Spanish company Navantia. In other words, this vehicle was, of course, in a style that would work for Romania, because today 14 submarines of this type are already in use or under construction by various countries. The Chilean Navy and the Malaysian Navy will each have 2 submarines of this type. The Brazilian Navy, on the other hand, will have 4 ranks and India will have the largest fleet. Besides these countries, Romania will have created a submarine power in the Black Sea. Russia was astonished at Romania's creation of a strong navy in this regard. In fact, the reaction of the Russians is quite normal. This is because Russia is currently pressed politically, diplomatically, and in many other ways by many countries not only on the territory of Ukraine, but also on the Black Sea side. But as we mentioned, the final blow to the Russians came from Romania, which has a coast on the Black Sea. It's not known whether the French Scorpene 2000 submarine that Romania will buy will affect the course of the war as much as Russia is worried about. But the fact that Russia is losing its power in the Black Sea with each passing day is seen as the biggest nightmare of the Moscow authorities. For this reason, Romania's inclusion of the Scorpene submarine in its naval power will reinforce this great nightmare of the Russians. Let's take a closer look at the French Scorpene 2000 submarine, which will be Romania's new naval power in the Black Sea. It is worth noting that the lengths of these submarines range from 60 to 70 meters. The width of the submarine is 8 meters. Due to the high degree of automation, the submarine crew consists of only 31 people. This team usually includes 6 officers and 25 foremen and soldiers. There are also 6 additional places inside the submarine with folding beds for cadets or paratroopers. On the other hand, for the daily management of the submarine that Romania plans to launch into the cool waters of the Black Sea, it is sufficient for 9 people to stand guard. Available materials give the boat up to 70 days of autonomy. In addition, the armament of the Scorpene includes 6 533mm torpedo tubes, the design of which complies with the STANAG 4405 standard. These weapons can be very diverse and are determined by a particular customer. The torpedo ammunition and Scorpene includes a total of 18 different weapons and military ammunition. These figures, in fact, highlight that the Scorpene submarine is a fully armored underwater rocket in amphibious and defense issues. In other words, when Romania landed the submarine in the Black Sea, it is estimated that there will be big changes in the general course because the countries working to make the Black Sea much safer are not limited to Romania. Turkey, known as Ukraine's brave ally, is constantly on the alert against Russian presence in the Black Sea and the threats it may pose in the future. Turkey's move on the security of the Black Sea is a critical strategy that even the USA could not predict. Amid rising regional tensions as war rages in Ukraine on the other side of the Black Sea, Turkey launched its first amphibious assault ship to expand its drone capabilities to land-to-sea operations. Anadolu can only serve light aircraft, especially helicopters and jets that can take off from shorter runways. In addition, this 232-meter-long and 32-meter-wide frigate can carry around 1,400 personnel, a battalion of soldiers, combat vehicles, and support units for overseas operations. In his speech at the opening ceremony of the ship held in Istanbul, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan stated that Anadolu can carry out military and humanitarian operations in every part of the world when needed. Erdogan sees this ship as a symbol that will reinforce Turkey's regional leadership position. But there is one more important detail in this regard. The Turkish Anadolu aircraft carrier will be one of the important elements that will protect the Black Sea from Russian naval threats after Romania's submarine move. Anadolu amphibious assault aircraft carrier was built by the Turkish-Spanish consortium at Istanbul Sedef shipyard, according to the design of the Spanish light aircraft carrier Juan Carlos I. In addition to helicopters, Turkey plans to deploy the new carrier Bayraktar B-3 and Kizilelmi unmanned aerial combat vehicles, both manufactured by the Turkish defense firm Bayka, as well as the high-jet light attack aircraft developed by Turkish aerospace industries. When the plan comes to fruition, Anadolu will be the world's first aircraft carrier whose fleet consists of mostly armed unmanned aerial vehicles. This situation shows that Turkey will represent a first in the world in the Ukraine war that's been going on for nearly 14 months. Turkey has positioned itself as an intermediary between Kiev and Moscow, helping to conclude an agreement that would allow the safe export of grain from Ukrainian ports via the Black Sea. But the Anadolu move reminded us that Turkey is exactly a brave ally of Ukraine because Hulusi Akar, Minister of National Defense of Turkey, stated that Anadolu will cruise in the Black Sea with the support of the Air Force after the public's visit. Those who wish will be able to tour and see Anadolu. Afterwards, this ship will cruise towards the Black Sea with the support of the Turkish Air Force. In this way, those who do not see the power of the Turkish armed forces will see and hear. In summary, with these critical moves by Turkey and Romania, Russia will be much more stuck in the Black Sea. Ukraine, on the other hand, will have much better opportunities to recapture the Crimean Peninsula in the Black Sea by being much more isolated from the danger of the Russian Navy. Perhaps the most crucial development of the Ukrainian war are taking place on the Bakhmut front. In recent months, Ukrainian and Russian armies have been fighting for this small mining town. While the conflicts in the small city would generally preceded, the war increased its importance day by day. There is a different development every day in Bakhmut. Although Russia began the war very ambitious, it could not make any serious gains for almost a year. This increased the losses of both infantry and soldiers of the Russian army and shook the trust of the Russian people in the army. On the other hand, the Russian army, which was a feared figure before the Ukrainian war, has become indistinguishable from any army that is no longer taken very seriously after its last year of performance. Russian President Vladimir Putin plunged his country into war despite its limited resources. The already deteriorating Russian economy has officially collapsed with war spending and global economic sanctions. Putin must deliver a significant war win to his people so that this collapse is forgotten, at least for a short time. This makes the Battle of Bakhmut a little more important. Once the Russian army takes control of Bakhmut, it will continue to advance into Ukraine. Ukraine continues to defend Bakhmut so that exactly this scenario does not happen, and so far it has managed to keep the Russians here. Another importance of Bakhmut is that if the Ukrainian army can drive the Russians out of here, it will open a corridor for itself where it can take the Donbass region back under its control, just as they struggle to liberate Crimea after taking control of Kherson on the southern front. So what's the latest situation in Bakhmut? Prior to Ukraine's counterattack aimed at recapturing Russian-controlled territory, Russian forces fought to cross the narrow river that bisects the eastern Ukrainian city of Bakhmut. Ukrainian forces moved out of their positions on the east bank of the river, which stretched from north to south and formed the front line between the Wagner Group, paramilitary fighters now leading the Russian offensive in Bakhmut, and the Ukrainian soldiers defending the city. Wagner's founder, Yevgeny Prigozhin, said Russian troops were positioned about 3 miles from downtown Bakhmut. For Bakhmut, the months-long war becomes even more important as he assigns new troops to the defense of Ukraine and promises to hold him. Despite Russian advances to the north and south that threaten Ukraine's supply lines entering the city, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky met with senior military officials in Bakhmut to discuss Ukraine's options. Some Western analysts have questioned why Ukraine has not withdrawn from a city of little strategic importance and where it is at risk of being cut off. Ukraine says it is trying to bring down Russian forces, which it says have suffered even greater losses. The area around the river in the center of the city became a killing zone as Ukrainian troops targeted Russian forces trying to cross from the east in fortified buildings. Ukraine has destroyed important bridges over the river, but any attempt to hold its positions there is jeopardized by Russian attempts to besiege the city. The Ukrainian armed forces repelled more than 100 Russian attacks in the past 24 hours, and subsequently, Russia bombed 19 settlements around Bakhmut. Russian military bloggers, often reflecting the views of the Kremlin, reported that Wagner troops launched an offensive to take the village of Kremova on the western bank of Bakhmut, allowing control of this village to cut off the Ukrainian forces and Chusovaya a possible retreat for Ukraine. Located on a hill overlooking Bakhmut from the west, he said he would let him plan an attack in the south of Ukraine. Newly mobilized Russian troops arrived in the Russian-controlled areas of the Zaporizhia region, from where they will cross into Bakhmut to join existing Russian troops ahead of an offensive that Ukrainian forces are suggesting will begin in the coming weeks. Russia continued to launch artillery strikes on Kherson in the south, which was retaken by Ukraine in November in parallel with its offensive on Bakhmut in eastern Ukraine's Donbass region, which Moscow was trying to seize. 3 civilians lost their lives and 5 were injured after Russia fired 335 rounds at different targets in the region since the re-entry of Ukrainian troops in November. The city of Kherson has been regularly bombed by Russian troops stationed along the Dnipro River. So what awaits us in the coming days? Exhausted by the winter battle that resulted in heavy casualties but little significant change in the front line, Ukraine and Russia are preparing for the spring offensive, which both sides hope will turn the tide of the war as the muddy ground dries up. Paved roads and fields, first in the south of Ukraine and then in the east, will become traversable again in the coming weeks, allowing armies of both countries to make breakthroughs, with mobile mechanized units coming out of the months-long defense of the eastern city of Bakhmut. The Ukrainian army is training tens of thousands of new recruits, including in camps operated abroad by the US and European allies, for 3 new corps expected to join the spring advances. Kiev is also receiving a massive influx of Western-made heavy weapons, including Leopard 2 tanks, Bradley and Stryker combat vehicles, and Paladin and Archer self-propelled howitzers, and is renewing the equipment it has consumed over the past year. However, for the first time, Ukraine will deploy such Western-made advanced tanks and infantry fighting vehicles on the battlefield. Ukrainian officials said that the spring offensive will begin in 1.5 to 2.5 months. During this time, Ukraine will accumulate resources and remain absolutely silent about where they can attack along the 830-mile active front line. Meanwhile, Russia gathered forces as it ought to break through the Ukrainian defenses in the eastern Donetsk region where Bakhmut is located. They made slow gains in Donetsk while suffering heavy losses during the winter months. The advances Russia was able to make every 100 to 200 meters in the field burned by artillery came at the cost of covering the ground with the corpses of its soldiers. Ukraine does not have such a manpower resource, and even if it did, no one would agree to use it as cannon fodder. As Russia prepares for a protracted war and President Vladimir Putin bets that the West's willingness to provide military and financial support to Kiev will not last, Ukraine is feeling increasing pressure to show results on the battlefield. This summer is incredibly important for the Ukrainian military. If they don't make progress to the end, voices will grow in the West, either calling for a negotiated solution or arguing that the West should not support Ukraine at all. As Ukrainian leaders seek to expel Russia from all the lands they have taken, they also understand that the success or failure of the impending offensive will determine Kiev's hand in any negotiations that may be imposed by Ukraine's Western partners. To be strong in any conversation, Ukraine must be strong on the battlefield. This is the way to peace. Ukrainian officials view Russia's military defeat as the only guarantee of their country's survival and are wary of the West's promises. Without full membership in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, something that will not be offered anytime soon, they point out that Ukraine renounced nuclear weapons inherited from the Soviet Union after the US, UK, and Russia provided security assurances in the 1994 Budapest Memorandum that force would not be used against the country's territorial integrity. The Ukrainian and Russian armed forces are entering action this spring, having lost most of their professional soldiers in the past year. According to Western officials, while no country publishes casualty statistics, the total casualties in wounded and dead amount to hundreds of thousands. As a result, the two armies now increasingly rely on soldiers with limited skills. Here, the intensity of Ukrainian attacks has reached new peaks as Ukrainians opened several more lines of attack. Due to the increased pressure, Russians started losing their positions and the occupation authorities suddenly launched evacuation from the prefrontal settlements. The evacuation sparked panic about the beginning of the Ukrainian counter-offensive. And today, Ukrainian Deputy Minister of Defense finally confirmed that the counter-offensive has started. Last time I told you that in the aftermath of reconnaissance in first operations, Ukrainians significantly reduced the gray zone area, got very close to Nesterenko and started destroying Russian defense infrastructure in the village. I also told you that Ukrainians started slowly increasing the area of operation and activating along the whole front line. The freshest reports suggest that Ukrainians breached the Russian defense in the trenches in front of Novodanilovka and got closer to Nestorenko and Kopelny from the east. This trench network posed a lot of inconveniences for Ukrainians, which is why it was one of their first targets. As you remember, the previous Ukrainian assault here failed because a part of the assault unit did not manage to cut the distance on time. It looks like the ongoing combat shakes down in the Zaporizhia region improve the level of coordination and combat capability and finally allow the Ukrainians to move further. Ukrainian presence was also noted in the southern part of Kamiansk, which means that Russians highly likely abandoned Piatykhty as well as the front moved south. Ukrainians started preparing for an attack on the next Russian trenches on the line. Getting closer also allowed Ukrainians to expose Russian mortar crews that previously operated in the back and promptly destroyed them. In some places, Ukrainian drone operators managed to identify and destroy Russian tanks that were used to reinforce defensive positions. Ukrainian head of Melitopol reported that Russians announced an urgent evacuation from all settlements between Vasilyevka and Tokmak in fear that this may very soon become the most active battleground. Russian intelligence reported that Ukrainians were spotted preparing to move in a lot of artillery systems. They also concluded that all artillery must be Western because only long-range artillery is fit for the prepared positions in order to prevent the accumulation of a critical amount of heavy equipment in the region. Russian forces started to actively use guided air bombs. These bombs weigh from 500 to 1,500 kilograms and have a range of up to 40 kilometers, which poses a significant threat to Ukrainian plans. The craters from the explosions are enormous and can reach up to 50 meters in diameter. Ukrainians are responding to these problems by creating fake warehouses and also reinforcing the region with air defense. However, in the meantime, Ukrainians are trained to reciprocate the damage and are also identifying and destroying Russian warehouses with ammunition and equipment. It looks like the same action is going to take place very soon in the arrived direction because Russian reconnaissance recently reported that Ukrainians are actively demining significant clusters of land. Another indicator of the imminent Ukrainian offensive actions here is the fact that certain elements of the 71st Jaeger Brigade and 46th Assault Brigade recently arrived at Orikhiv, according to Russian sources. But while the soldiers around Orikhiv are just preparing to launch an assault, the famous Ukrainian 72nd Mechanized Brigade conducted a series of assaults in the vicinity of Oladula. Previously, I told you that Ukrainians counterattacked Russians from the north, undermined Russian defense in the eastern hamlet, and then cleared it. Recent reports suggest that now they mostly focused on the south and attacked Russian positions in the Romanian 3 lines in front of the town. And most importantly, they attacked the northern part of Pavlivka. Ukrainians did not conduct any offensive actions in the direction of Pavlivka for a very long time. And even though it is possible that this was just a supporting attack to protect the flank, it can still be a part of the preparation for crossing the river in the future and further movement in the direction of Volnovaka and Mariupol. The intensification of fighting along the whole southern line has been noted by many analysts. But today, the Ukrainian Deputy Minister of Defense finally confirmed that the counter-offensive operation has started. She stated that it is incorrect to wait for a specific date because counter-offensive is a long process and it is only the culmination that happens quickly. But no one can predict when the culmination will happen, as it depends on the conditions on the ground. Right now, Ukrainians are testing Russian defenses, letting the newly formed assault units gain combat experience and, for the most part, follow the path of lowest resistance, meaning they push where they can, leaving the strongest positions for later. Russian analysts are predicting that Ukrainians will make at least 2 huge attacks during the last week of April to test new tactics and then launch a full-scale counter-offensive during the first half of May.